refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident.
Merrick Garland, he's the Attorney General, you know. I just pause for a minute here. And Mitch McConnell, I mean, I've had some criticisms of Mitch McConnell, but if that guy did anything that we should applaud him for, it was in 2012 in 2016, he refused to bring the nomination of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court up for a committee hearing. And he took so much crap from people in Washington, D.C. It was an outrage. You can't do this. You're going to leave it up to the presidential. First of all, it helped Trump get elected because we had an open seat on the Supreme Court. And so even people who weren't on board with Trump 100%, they had a choice in front of them. The next president's going to nominate the person to fill that seat. Do you want it to be Hillary Clinton doing the nominating, or do you want to roll the dice with Donald Trump? Well, that was one of the reasons Trump won. Mitch McConnell kept Merrick Garland off the Supreme Court, not only helping Trump win, but he also saved our nation because this Merrick Garland guy is a nightmare. He is an egotistical, narcissistic megalomaniac who is now trying to wreak revenge against Donald Trump for that. So he's on Capitol Hill. Matt Gaetz of Florida has some simple questions for him because, you know, there's a lot of people out there in the media and Democrats who are accusing us Republicans of being conspiracy theorists because we think, I know, listen to this, because this is a really wild, whacked out theory that we've got. But we think, and we promulgate this idea, that the prosecutions against Donald Trump, the one in Manhattan that just happened, the one that's going on down in Fulton County with the district attorney there, Fani Willis, that those are actually coordinated by Democrats and specifically by people in the Biden White House or in the Biden administration. I know it seems like a completely whacked out conspiracy theory. Where's my tinfoil hat? I'm going to rip off my shirt and start screaming like Alex Jones. But that's what some of us believe. And Matt Gaetz, he wants to get to the bottom of this.
Attorney General, you've told us that it's a dangerous conspiracy theory to allege that the Department of Justice is communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump. You can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fani Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about. Now, you were a judge, once nominated the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No,
and you didn't because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't because there's a federal rule barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that same theory of attacks on the judicial process, like shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction, which has to be respected. I won't comment on it. That case is still ongoing.
All right. This is really, really good stuff. And I get it. Just like Marjorie Taylor Greene earlier in the program, Matt Gaetz rubs some people the wrong way. They don't always like his style. They don't always like his approach. Neither do I. By the way, listen, we come from different parts of the country, different worlds, different worldviews, different cultures. But to the point, he is hammering home something so incredibly important and undeniable that it has to be applauded. Because understand what Merrick Garland is doing here. These slimy, slippery, deceitful, obsequious little bastards. Sorry, Kevin. He gets up there and gives this big statement about how dangerous it is for people to suggest some conspiracy theory that lawfare is being used and the judicial system is being used as a weapon against Donald Trump, when all we've got is a pure case of law and order and the system working properly. By the way, I'd love for him to say that about George Floyd or about the events in Ferguson or about, any of the race riots we've seen for the last 10 years in this country. You don't hear Merrick Garland saying, listen, the system worked. We have a judicial system. It's about law and order. It's about right and wrong, right? No, they'll convince you that our entire judicial system is corrupted and broken. But in this one case, finally, they found the pure trial. No, there's no political bias here at all. So Garland gets up there and he gives this statement, which is obviously reacting to and commenting on the outrageous Alvin Bragg prosecution of Donald Trump in a jurisdiction that went 89% for Joe Biden, with a judge who contributed to Joe Biden against most judicial ethics protocols. Merrick Garland makes this case that, it's dangerous to float these conspiracy theories. You're undermining the system of justice in our country. And then when asked questions about it, he says, I'm not going to comment on that. That would be inappropriate for me as Attorney General to comment on an ongoing prosecution in another jurisdiction. You mother... I'm saying a lot of bad words today. You just went up there and grandstanded, calling everybody a hysterical conspiracy theorist, and you were obviously taking the side of the judge and the prosecution and the jury in this case, and then when challenged on it, I can't possibly say anything about that. That would be absolutely inappropriate, but I will dictate the historical relevance of separate jurisdictions, district attorneys, and attorneys general from the federal government. It all started when Senator Hamilton with James Madison went to Philadelphia in the Constitutional Convention. Now, on day one, this was the discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, your time is up. I've got to go back to DOJ now. Actually, no, I'm going to go back into my tree and make some more cookies with my fellow Keebler elves. It was a gratuitous attack on this man's diminutive status, and I apologize for nothing. So that's what he does. He goes out there, he comments on the trial on his terms, and he gets to throw out his propaganda, and then when challenged on it, I'm not going to comment on that.
Mr. Attorney General, I hadn't asked you about the verdict yet. We were getting there. I was talking about the judge. And so let me ask you this question about your time as a judge. Was there ever a time when you were a judge when you had a family member who was personally profiting off of the notoriety of a case that was before your court?
I'm going to say again, it's very clear you're asking me to comment on a case in another jurisdiction.
No, wait, hold on, Mr. Attorney General. Did you ever have a family member profit off of the notoriety of any case that you sat over?
Say again, you're asking
yes or no?
You're asking me to comment on a case currently.
Well, it seems you're connecting the dots, Mr. Attorney General. I'm just asking you as to a general principle, but you are aware that Judge Merchan's daughter was profiting off of this prosecution. You are aware that that creates the appearance of impropriety. You know the very reason there's a federal rule against judges giving donations is because it is the very attack on the judicial process that we're concerned about.
That, by the way, in case you missed it, was freaking brilliant. Matt Gaetz asking hypotheticals about whether a judge in a presiding case should make political donations, especially if it's relevant to a person that he's actually overseeing in the trial, if it's appropriate for a family member of that judge to profit off the notoriety of the case. Merrick Garland immediately says, well, I'm not going to comment on the Trump case. And Matt Gaetz says, who's talking about the Trump case? Oh, I'm sorry. So you are aware of this. So you think that there's a problem. You're just not going to comment on it. I'm out here talking about broader ethics and principles. You immediately hone in on the Trump case. Thank you. I think you've proven our point. Go back to your tree, make your cookies.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with anything you just said, but I'm not going to comment on it.
Okay, so you won't comment on it, Mr. Attorney General, but you had no problem dispatching Matthew Colangelo. Who's Matthew Colangelo?
That is false. I did not dispatch Matthew Colangelo.
Matthew
That's
Colangelo,
false.
Matthew
False.
Colangelo became the Assistant Attorney General at the very beginning of the Biden administration. Without having been Senate confirmed, goes and gets this senior role at the DOJ. And then after, I believe it's Gupta replaces Colangelo, Colangelo makes this remarkable downstream career journey from the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then pops up in Alvin Bragg's office to go get Trump. And you're saying that's just a career choice that was made that has nothing to do with the lawfare coordinated by the
saying it's false. I did not dispatch Mr. Colangelo anywhere.
Well, do you know how he ended up there?
I assume he he applied for a job there and got the job.
But see, you know what?
I tell you, I had nothing to do with it.
Well, you might not have had anything to do with it, but we've got this contemporaneous evidence in Mr. Pomerantz's book. So Pomerantz writes this book, which I'm sure you're aware of, where he says, we put together the legal eagles to get Trump. We got all these folks together and we assembled them for that purpose. And so when we on the Judiciary Committee think about attacks on the judicial process, our concern is that the facts and the law aren't being followed. A target is acquired here, Trump, and then you assemble the legal talent from DOJ, Mr. Pomerantz, and you bring everybody in to get him. And meanwhile, the judge is making money on it. The judge is making money on it. The judge's family is making money on it for stuff that you yourself wouldn't do.
All right, and just in case you missed it, when he mentions Mr. Colangelo and Merrick Garland here saying, I didn't dispatch him. You notice the one thing he objects to? I didn't have anything to do with it. My fingerprints aren't on it. You can't prove a damn thing, you crook. Mr. Colangelo was an assistant attorney general at the federal level in the Justice Department. He left that job to go take a job as an assistant DA in the city of Manhattan. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Nobody in the history of mankind does that. You try to move from an assistant DA job up to the federal level and up to the DOJ. You don't go in the other direction. And suddenly he makes that move. He leaves the Justice Department after being appointed by this guy and by President Biden. He leaves. He goes to take this nothing job in the DA's office in Manhattan. And within less than a year, he's in the courtroom prosecuting Donald Trump. But Merrick Garland had nothing to do with it. You can't prove it, I tell you, copper. You can't prove it. But that's the only thing that he's objecting to here. All right, sorry, Kevin.
No one's going to buy this. No one's going to believe it. It's going to create great disruption. And I am saddened by it because, like you, I have given my life to the law. I care deeply about the law. And I think that the lawfare we've seen against President Trump will do great damage well beyond our time in public service. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
Ranking members recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, do you want to respond to anything in Mr. Gaetz's tirade?
Oh, that's very cool, though. I got to say, it's really cool that they let the Penguin from Gotham City show up and ask some questions there on the dais. That's good for him.
I think everything he was talking about was a case in another jurisdiction, an independent prosecutor. Mr. Pomerantz worked for that independent prosecutor. I don't know Mr. Pomerantz. I don't know what's in his book, but these are decisions made in another office independent of the Justice Department.
There you go. Well, listen, I am satisfied. I don't know about you, but I'm satisfied. No corruption here. Everything's fine. Look the other way. And don't you dare suggest that there's anything wrong with any of this, because if you do, you're guilty of a conspiracy theory and you're undermining the legal and judicial system in this country. You're the one who's undermining it, not these guys. Got it? Great.